Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, February the 13th, 2025. Today I wanted to talk about Donald Trump's attempts to rein back on federal government, and I have delayed discussing the subject because I wasn't sure I had anything useful to say. But I wanted to consider one aspect of his activities, and that's relating to USAID, which stands for the United States Agency for International Development. And I really wanted to look at USAID and, take it back to its beginnings, because it was set up by John F. Kennedy with an executive order, and that executive order was 10973 on November the 3rd, 1961. So it would be a good opportunity to look at what that executive order set up, and what the nature of this organization was, and why it was set up. And of course, this is an astrology channel, it's not a politics channel. I want to look at it from an astrological perspective, though we should bear in mind that one of the reasons an organization like USAID was set up was because of a book written in 1958 called The Ugly American by Lederer and Burdick. Now, that's not ugly American as it sounds. Might sound like an insult to America. Far from it. The Ugly American was a character in this book titled The Ugly American, an American who went abroad, was intelligent, was very technically minded, and spoke the local language. So he might go somewhere, I don't know, Vietnam, Laos, or Cambodia, and get involved with improving people's lives in a real and tangible way. And in this way, was able to project American soft power. And really, if you think about it, that is what USAID is all about. And just don't forget, USAID is a Scorpio organization, or was a Scorpio organization. It's difficult to know what exactly is going on with USAID at the moment, but I think it's sort of being integrated into the State Department. But before I look at all that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, February the 13th, 2025. Usual reminder, if you like this channel, I'd be very grateful if you were indeed to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to become a subscriber, because it does make a big difference. So here is a chart for today, set for noon, New York time, and the moon is in Virgo. Moon is at 8 degrees 15 of this sign, and moon actually went into Virgo at 1:07 a.m. London time. So if you're in the Americas, moon went into Virgo yesterday. If you're in Europe or Africa or the Middle East, then the moon goes into Virgo very early in the morning, very early today. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, well, moon might go into Virgo late morning, perhaps early afternoon if you're in New Zealand. So it is a moon in Virgo day, and moon switching from Leo to Virgo, that is a big change. Moon moving out of a fire sign into an earth sign, and now we have a planet in an earth sign, if we regard the moon as a planet rather than just being a satellite. And so that does give the horoscope a little bit of earth and a little bit of grounding. And with the moon in Virgo, the usual thing, moon in Virgo tends to notice things. Perhaps we notice things now that we didn't notice before. And also, of course, moon is a service sign, and that might be one of the big differences between the moon in Leo, moon in Virgo. Moon in Leo tends to think of oneself and see things in terms of what is happening, and what is happening to oneself and to one's own interests and one's own ego. But moon in Virgo is more about service, what you can do for other people. I mean, in its sort of higher sense, moon in Virgo also is a good organizing principle. So there is a changeover, but it says the changeover is important for another reason, and that is the fact that we had a full moon yesterday. And so the full moon is really, very apparent right now, has been. The moon in Aquarius, sun in Aquarius, moon in Pisces, in opposite signs. So that's when we really feel the influence of this full moon. But now that the moon has moved into Virgo, the immediacy of that full moon has passed, and we can perhaps get a greater sort of perspective on things. The moon is now well and truly waning, and now it's it's the run up to, well, not the run up, but it's that last half of a lunar cycle, perhaps the less fortunate part of a lunar cycle, where we should if possible avoid doing things which are completely new. It's more about making sense of the old and tying up loose ends. And so that is something to consider. And we do have a new moon. The last, when is the new moon? So the new moon is on February the 28th, last day of February. So between now and the last day of February, we can tie up some loose ends. Now, there are actually, from a geocentric perspective, not a great deal of there aren't many aspects happening at the moment. The moon in Virgo, it makes a square to Jupiter. Really, that square between the moon and Jupiter, you could say, is the main aspect of the day. And moon in Virgo square Jupiter and Gemini. You can see the tension there with between the two. I mean, the moon in Virgo likes things to be sorted out, realizable, and wants to know what's going on. And Jupiter in Gemini is about variety and excitement and changing one's mind. And so the moon square Jupiter could, for some of us, actually be quite frustrating. We're trying to get something together, but then something new happens, and we have this contradiction, or this battle between our desire for variety and our desire for order, and somehow we have to bring everything together and make sure that things don't get too boring, but also that things don't get too chaotic and out of control. Variety is great, but if we take things too far, there could be a problem. And another aspect we've got is Mercury semi-sextile Neptune. So Mercury is still in Aquarius. It's getting ready to leave the sign, getting ready to move into Pisces, and makes that semi-sextile to Neptune. Remember, that's a 30-degree aspect, and a 30-degree aspect in astrology is not always particularly fortunate. It can represent a certain clash of principles. Mercury in Aquarius sounds logical. Mercury is in an air sign. It's trying to logically make sense of things. It's about ideas. Neptune in Pisces is about the sea. It's about emotion. And so, however logical we are, we have to take into account emotional realities. And that's not always easy, but it's something we should do. And this especially applies if we are talking to people, trying to get on with people. We might try to be reasonable, but that's not enough. We have to consider how people are thinking, and not just thinking, but feeling. And so don't just talk your head off and without thinking about the impact you're having. And a bit of subtlety with Mercury sextile, with Mercury semi-sextile Neptune could go a long way. So that is the picture in noon New York. If we just want to get a different view, noon in Sydney, Australia, you can see that at noon, the moon is actually at 29 Leo. So if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the first half of the day is moon in Leo, and then the moon doesn't go into Virgo until late morning, or even not even late morning. I would have said lunchtime, even early afternoon, and there is a changeover there, and that means that in Australasia that moon square Jupiter isn't quite so important. It's more about the moon being sort of opposition Mercury, and moon opposition Mercury, the moon in Leo, opposition Mercury. It's the things you say, the things you try to say, and it's not all about you, but it is a time of transition, and yeah, you don't get that moon square Jupiter, and it just could be a day of two parts if you are in Australia or New Zealand. And then there is the heliocentric picture, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, where it should be. And from a heliocentric viewpoint, Venus is opposition Pluto. Venus in Leo is opposition Pluto in Aquarius, and the aspect is exact. And it is a time of persuasion, attempting to persuade, trying to get people to understand us, accept us, believe in us. And relationships might be a little more complicated than usual, just things happening that we need to take on board, and we shouldn't necessarily take things at face value. Someone's trying to be manipulative, or some organization might be trying to manipulate us. That's always the way it works, isn't it? And the Earth is at 25 Leo, and it's starting to make a square to Uranus. That square between the Earth and Uranus will be exact tomorrow. The Earth square Uranus is the same aspect as Sun square Uranus. So we had the Sun square Uranus yesterday, on Wednesday. Was it Wednesday or was it Tuesday? I think it was Tuesday, actually. So earlier in the week we had Sun square Uranus. Now we've got Earth square Uranus. It's kind of the same thing. And it stirs things up, and it's a reminder. But we've just had this full moon. This full moon on Wednesday, yesterday, it was a powerful full moon. Full moon square Uranus. That does create events which we might not necessarily have expected. And Earth square Uranus is just more of the same, and we shouldn't expect things to run in a orderly way, because things can happen. And again, that was the nature of the full moon. So those are some thoughts on the heliocentric picture, and I now want to talk about the 12 signs, do my forecast for the 12 signs for today, Thursday, February the 13th, 2025. Though I should point out that from an aspect perspective, there's not a lot going on. Moon square Jupiter, Mercury semi-sextile Neptune, and that means that there isn't necessarily a great deal to talk about, but we'll see what I come up with. Anyway, here are my forecasts. Aries, the moon is now in Virgo. Okay, it might not move into Virgo until lunchtime if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but the moon is moving into Virgo. And with the moon in Virgo, there is a sense in which you do need to slow down a bit. Things aren't quite as exciting as they used to be. The last couple of days for Aries, I have been quite positive. because the moon was in Leo. Venus is still in Aries, but it seemed a time where things really were moving for you. And now that that has happened, now that you're aware of what you can do and what the possibilities are, now you have to kind of put it all together, and that's a way to use the moon in Virgo to take what you've understood and create some order out of it, and to decide what really does work for you. And hopefully over the last couple of days with that full moon, you have had some insights, and now you know what works for you. You need to create a system where it can all happen. And that might require some hard work and some clarity. And with moon moving through Virgo, one does think of discernment, deciding what is important and what can be left until later. You also should realize that you've only got a limited amount of energy. I mean, we've all got a limited amount of energy. We can't do everything at once. And Aries is a high energy sign, but Aries, like everyone else, if they just do everything, they can burn themselves out. And so Aries, it's important that you make some decisions. You decide what you can do, what is possible, and if it's beyond your capabilities, you should be honest about that. Also, if it's unimportant. Some things just really are unimportant, but they can still take up a lot of your time if you allow them to. So Aries, decide what matters and don't overload yourself. And bear in mind that you are only human. You have to realize that if you take on too much, you could exhaust yourself, especially with Moon in Virgo square Jupiter. Moon in Virgo square Jupiter can be about overdoing it, just getting attracted by different things. You do one thing, you notice something else, and you want to do something else, and you do this and you do that, and you find you've run out of time, run out of energy, and this is not really what you needed, not what you wanted. And the question is, how do you decide? How do you decide between the things that should be done now and the things that can be perhaps left until later, or even just abandoned? Maybe they're just not necessary. Well, at the moment, Virgo, I do think that you have sorry, you're not a Virgo, you're an Aries. At the moment, Aries, you do have a powerful concept of what it means to be free. That's always important for an Aries, being free, having no one telling you what to do. You don't like that, you don't appreciate it, and it's stronger than usual. And you will resist anyone telling you what to do or insisting that you do one thing as opposed to another thing. And this goes back to how you organize your life and what decisions you make. It's not a time for doing things according to another person's schedule. Other people might have ideas about what you should be doing, and I suppose that would especially apply if you have a job or you're running a business. People might have ideas, but the ideas need to come from you. And if you listen to your intuition, then you'll know what you should be doing, and it comes from you. And if you do what is right for yourself, then Aries, you will feel a great sense of relief, maybe even a sense of liberation. And the things that are trivial, the things imposed upon you by others will vanish, and you'll have a clear path, and you'll know, with a good heart that you are moving in the right direction. Taurus. Taurus, the moon has changed sign, or is changing sign if you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia. And it's moving from Leo into Virgo. And this sign change, I would have said, is useful for a number of reasons. For one thing, the immediate impact of the full moon is over. The full moon yesterday did have an influence on Taurus, did make you think about where you're going and what's holding you back, and you might have found yourself putting a lot of energy into your home and your family and things that you felt you had to do, and there might have been a sense of obligation. And now that the moon is out of Leo into Virgo, now that the immediate power of that full moon is starting to wane. I mean, the moon is now, of course, waning. You probably have, Taurus, more freedom, and you can start to explore the things that really you want to explore. And it is about what you can do, what you can do that is really a fundamental expression of who you are, and that's really what matters. It's not about doing things because your family expect it, or maybe there's some obligation relating to your home that can't be avoided, or maybe an obligation relating to your work. But it's all about you and what you can do well, and that's how you should see the moon. That's how you should see the moon in Virgo. But it's not just doing things that are fun. It's doing things which also make sense, which have a certain grounding to them. You can ground them in terms of the real world, because Taurus is actually a very practical sign. There's a limit to how much you want to float off on clouds of fantasy. At some stage, you want to just do something that is grounded in reality and that is real and that can have tangible results, and also can be fun and can be an essential part of your creativity. And that's how the moon in Virgo might work. And the moon in Virgo does make a square to Jupiter, and this square to Jupiter could be a bit challenging, because you kind of know what you want to do, but you're still thinking about the results. And that is Jupiter in Gemini. You're thinking about, where is this going, and are you going to get rewarded? And that might be how moon square Jupiter works. And if you do something, at some stage you need to get feedback. You need to get feedback to say that what you're doing is worth it. And that feedback could take the form of praise, but it could be simply about a financial reward or a benefit. Okay, needn't be literally financial, but getting a benefit, and a tangible benefit. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. You should be looking for a tangible benefit for whatever you're doing, because that is a reminder, in a way, that you actually exist. And that's maybe what the price is. What the price is all about. I sort of had this sort of image that I can't remember what the book was. That someone was sort of describing someone in India creating this elaborate carving, and someone offered them too little for it, and so they took this thing that they had been spending days, weeks making, and they destroyed it, because you had to be paid the price. If you're not paid the price of something, then that is an insult. And getting that price for you, Taurus, at the moment is important. Again, that price may not be about money, maybe about recognition, and there could be actually something transactional about it. We're often dismissive of a transactional approach, but the transaction is about your identity. And if you're not getting sufficiently rewarded, yeah, that is, not just an insult, but it sort of undermines who you are. So ensuring that the reward is there, Taurus, I do think at the moment that might really matter. But, aside from that, Taurus, you may need to push it. And, it may be that you want to do something and you know that right now things aren't quite good enough for one reason or another. Maybe you'll realize that you aren't quite good enough, that as it stands, and that you actually need to put more effort into something. And if you can do that, that would be great. So try to evaluate yourself, Taurus, with the moon with the moon in Virgo, and be realistic about it. And you make that evaluation, and then you decide where you might be short of the mark, and then Taurus, you give it everything you've got. And if you're persistent, then it may actually be a day of rapid self-improvement. Gemini. Mercury is your ruler, and Mercury is now right at the end of Aquarius. It's getting ready for the sign change. Mercury moving into Pisces. I don't actually think Mercury moving into Pisces is such a bad thing. It might seem to be not great because Mercury is in its detriment and its fall in Pisces. Traditionally, Pisces is not a great sign for Mercury to be in, but I think it's going to be okay this time around. And so that's something to prepare for. And while you're in this state of preparation, as Moon moves from Aquarius to Pisces, there may be a certain sense that you don't entirely know what's happening, and that's because Mercury is making a semi-sextile to Neptune. So Mercury and Neptune are 30 degrees apart, and so that means that you do have to integrate Neptune, and integrating Neptune can be hard. It's hard because Neptune is so nebulous, and with Mercury in Aquarius, you might try your hardest to be logical and to understand things in perhaps a factual and reasonable way, but some things just are difficult to verbalize. You can feel them. I mean, Geminis have feelings like everyone else. They might often try to discount those feelings, but they do matter. And there's just something you feel under the surface that it's important, but it's just difficult to integrate, and that could take time. And you shouldn't just say the first thing that comes into your head, and you shouldn't feel pushed, with Mercury in this transitional stage. And additionally, Gemini, do consider what is important, and if you like, your real grounding. That matters at the moment. The moon has gone into Virgo. Moon is in an earth sign, and sometimes Geminis can be rather ungrounded. They can sort of float off from one idea to another and not want to commit to anything. But Moon in Virgo is asking you to commit, at least commit to maybe a single course of action, and not spread yourself too thinly. And that's always a danger with Geminis. And Moon in Virgo is asking you to anchor yourself. And this Moon in Virgo it's making a square to Jupiter in Gemini, and this moon square Jupiter may be a little challenging. Jupiter in Gemini is about what you want to do, the direction in which you want to go, and
you might have a vision, but a somewhat flawed vision at the moment, because Jupiter in Gemini. Yeah, it's nice that Jupiter is in your sign, but Jupiter in Gemini can concentrate on the wrong things. Just decide that this is really important and then go for it, but without any real commitment, real heart. It's an idea, but if you want a vision, the idea is not enough. It's not enough to have ideas. You've got to go beyond the ideas. And so how do you go beyond the triviality of certain ideas? And well, one way you can do that is by asking yourself, what is important, what matters, and trying to ground yourself. And that's what Moon in Virgo is attempting to do. And so don't feel that you have to make a big impression, that you have to be out there in the world, always active, always moving. It would potentially be a lot of fuss, a lot of trouble that, in the end gets nothing. So gets you nowhere. And that means, Gemini, that it could be a time when you very much have to concentrate on the priorities that matter. In the process, though, you are an interesting person. We talked about this yesterday. I think at the moment, Gemini, you do have a certain charisma, like you had yesterday, and people do find you interesting. And if you actually make an effort in a social sense, if you make an effort to get on with people, if you make an effort to introduce yourself to people, and if you make an effort to motivate people and to bring people together, then I think your efforts might actually be quite successful, to your surprise. But, don't think about it too much. Try to interact, and try to interact with enthusiasm. That's what people want. But you don't have to be too enthusiastic about it, and you have to think about your own space and what's important. You certainly don't want to be in a situation where you're allowing other people and social concerns to dominate your life. But there is a place for you to be a social animal. Just don't exaggerate. Cancer. The full moon is kind of over in its really immediate way, because with a full moon, you've got a moon in this last full moon, the full moon that was yesterday, we had a sort of moon in Leo, opposition the sun in Aquarius, and as we know, Cancerians can be very sensitive to the lunar cycle, and it can take up a lot of your time, and you can be aware of the way you change, the way you move from one thing to another, and it can be a little bit exhausting the time of a full moon. But the moon is moving into Virgo, and that does mean that we can say that the full moon is over. The moon and the sun are no longer in opposite signs, and the moon, when it moves into Virgo, it doesn't make many aspects, at least today it doesn't. It does make a square to Jupiter, but with that moon in Virgo, Cancer, I think you actually have a chance to look after yourself and also the people that matter to you, perhaps the people who are dependent on you. You can look after them, and you understand their needs. That is the nature of Virgo, and with Moon in Virgo, you don't have to overwhelm yourself. I mean, it's because you understand what matters, and there is this service element to the Moon in Virgo. And if you need to help people and be of assistance, you certainly can be. But you don't want to exaggerate. You do what you can, but you don't have to go over the top. Moon in Virgo gives you the reminder that you haven't got all the energy in the world. And there are limits to your compassion. There are limits to there are limits to, well, the hours in a day, but there's also a limit to how much you can care. You can't care for everyone. It's just not possible. And I mean, at times you might be tempted. I mean, a moon in Virgo does make a square to Jupiter, so moon square Jupiter could be about a certain temptation to exaggerate on an emotional level, but I don't think you have to, because moon in Virgo is asking you to make a decision, or make a series of decisions, about what matters and what doesn't, what is unimportant, or even being able to realize that some people don't need your help. They might be asking for your help, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give it. And at the same time, Cancer, I think that you're going to be very good at being able to express your needs, be honest about those needs, and also be honest about what might be preventing you from getting what you need, what might be blocking you. And that's something that could happen today, could happen tomorrow. The moon is actually starting to make an opposition to Saturn, and I mean it's not going to be exact today, the opposition to Saturn. That may be more about tomorrow, but with this moon opposition Saturn, it just may be an awareness that some people are not necessarily useful. I mean, they might be very demanding, but just because someone is demanding doesn't mean that you should give in to those demands, accept those demands, or take those demands seriously. And just don't forget about how you are able to make demands, because with Moon in Virgo, Cancer, you're able to express yourself very well. And you can focus on the things that matter, and just don't be distracted. Yeah, you could be distracted with Moon square Jupiter. Moon square Jupiter might encourage you to go all over the place in extreme situations, to go to too many places, do too much driving, too much visiting, too much short distance traveling. That's not something you want to do. You need to respect yourself and make sure that other people respect you, and give you the respect that you deserve. Leo, there may be a financial element to what's happening today, because the moon is moving out of Leo into Virgo, and with the moon moving into Virgo, Leo, it may be a time when you feel that you have to spend money, or an issue of money starts to make itself felt, and you have to respond, and you may want to spend money, for example. You might feel that is important on something or things that just seem important at the time, but really, are they important? And it just may be that if you spend money just for the sake of it, it's just money down the drain, or money that just doesn't need to be spent, or you could get something cheaper somewhere else. But that's how Moon square Jupiter could work. But Moon is in Virgo, and Moon in Virgo, if you handle it right, it could just really encourage you to think about how you're spending money, and to think about what things cost. And if you really think about it, you'll realize that just some things are just too expensive, and they may be unnecessary, or you could get them cheaper somewhere else. And that could be one way in which the Moon square Jupiter works in a constructive way, spending a lot of energy on getting a good deal, and not stopping until you get that good deal, and really thinking about why you're having to pay money for certain things, and what it is all about, and also be able to think about the motivation of the person trying to sell you something. I mean, I know that sounds rather boring. Today needn't just be about money. We do have Venus. Venus still is in Aries. There is fire around, and with Venus moving into Aries, you have you continue to have the opportunity to expand your horizons through other people. People still have a lot to offer if you make the effort. I mean, in terms of inspiration, but it's not immediate. It's not necessarily there right in front of you. So if you feel bored or uninspired today, then make an effort to seek the right people out, and don't feel too self-reliant. Sorry, let me say it again. Don't feel too reliant on other people. Completely the opposite of what I was trying to say. You should respect your own intellect and your own capacity to be inspired, and that is because of the, if you like, the aftershocks of some of the aspects we've had. So yesterday we had a full moon. We also had, at the beginning of the week, we had Mercury square Uranus, we had Sun square Uranus. Those aspects are still very much there. And Mercury is still square Uranus. The Sun is sort of halfway between the conjunction between, or rather, the Mercury is moving away from a conjunction of the Sun, and Mercury is square Uranus. So So what I'm trying to say is that Sun, Mercury, and Uranus are very much all together. I mean, let me just show you this on the 90-degree dial, just so that I can really make my point clear. So if we put up a 90-degree dial. This is just for you. I'm not doing it for anyone else. So if we put up the 90-degree dial and we put the pointer on the Sun, which is your ruler, we can see that the Sun is on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, and it's pretty close. I mean, it's it's less than a degree, and that is one of the things going on for you at the moment, and that Mercury-Uranus pairing is very inspiring, and that inspiration can come from you, and you don't need outside feedback to get that buzz. So don't be over reliant on other people. Don't feel that the energy and the power needs to come from others. It can come from others. It would be great if other people were inspiring, but if they're not inspiring, then don't worry about it. And they might not be. The moon is starting to make an opposition to Saturn, so don't be dependent. Any sense of dependency should really now be passing. The sun might be in Aquarius, your opposite sign. This is a sign that is kind of linked with other people, but the Sun is not going to be in Aquarius forever. In 5 days' time, less than 5 days' time, the Sun will move into Pisces, and it will be a mutual reception to Venus, and it is a time when your power is on the up. It might not feel like it, and it does start with yourself, and really try to be as inspiring and as inspired as possible, because I really think you can be. And really, Leo, it all starts with you, and really it always does all start with you, because Sun in Leo, if you've got the Sun in Leo, then you have a great sense of yourself, If you have your ascendant in Leo, then this is about your disposition and how you present yourself, and you really can be the center of things, and you can be the initiator of things. Virgo. Mercury is making a semi-sextile to Neptune. And this aspect between Mercury and Neptune is somewhat problematic if it's not handled in the right way. Mercury wants to be in control in Aquarius. It wants to be intellectually in control. It wants to understand how things work, how things are moving, and it wants to be logical. And it probably has a great belief in its own ideas, and maybe that's you, Virgo. You're right. You believe maybe that you have really worked things out, and you understand what's going on. But Neptune has a capacity to trip you up. Neptune is about things which are not necessarily straightforward. You'd like them to be straightforward. You'd like to dwell on the surface, but you can't. Or rather, if you try to dwell on the surface and you try to look at things at face value, then there's a possibility that you'll get things wrong, and that means that you have got to, as far as you can, incorporate that Neptune, incorporate the confusion of the planet, and also understand that there are subtle currents swirling all around you, which need to be incorporated and understood. Because if you ignore them, if you ignore those currents, then it's going to be very difficult for you to make sense of anything. And you should, as far as possible, not be drawing any finite conclusions today, certainly, because Mercury is your ruler, and Mercury is now, as far as, apart from making a semi-sextile to Neptune, it's moving into the last degree of Pisces. Mercury is getting ready for its transition. Last degree of Aquarius. So Mercury is getting ready for its transition from Aquarius to Pisces. And so things are a little bit unsettled, and you haven't got all the information, and you're still trying to sort things out, especially as the moon is in Virgo as well. So moon in Virgo is something that I would regard it as helpful, the moon being in Virgo, because you are a Virgo. The moon is in your sign. It might not move into Virgo until lunchtime if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but still, with the moon in Virgo, you are responsive to what is happening, at least on a material sense, and you get all those material details, no problem in that department. And it's just that with that Mercury semi-sextile Neptune, you've just got to be prepared to go a bit deeper. You've just got to see the various levels that things are happening on different levels. The surface level is not unimportant. We tend to think that things that happen on the surface somehow are not worthwhile. Surface details have a bad reputation. Kind of surface, superficial. No, everything, all levels matter, including the material and surface level. But with that Mercury semi-sextile Neptune, you just have to be prepared to go deeper into things. And this is especially the case, when dealing with other people. People are complicated, and you mustn't make assumptions about their motivations, and you certainly mustn't make assumptions about their personalities, because you don't know. I mean, none of us know. None of us know what other people are really like. Even the people we might live with or are really close to, we've known them for decades, but still we don't really know. Not really. At some level, we are all alone, and don't make assumptions, but you can get to know people a little bit better with that Mercury sextile Neptune if you make the effort. And in fact, if you make the effort with that semi-sextile. So semi-sextile, it's not a bad aspect like an opposition. It's a bad aspect in the sense that it is just challenging. And if we go with that challenge, and we make a real effort to understand people without being overwhelmed, but if we make an effort, then I think there will be rewards. And we can in the end come over as, or you can come in, I'm not a Virgo, you can come over as someone who is very compassionate and understanding, and you actually have the capacity, Virgo, to bring people together if you make the effort, and you can do it in such a way that your own ego and individuality are not overwhelmed. Yeah, it is all possible. I mean, I think that to an extent you might be afraid of being overwhelmed if you have too much going on, but you can hold everything together and at the same time maintain your integrity. It really is possible. Libra, the moon is moving into Virgo, and it stays in Virgo for a couple of days. And with the moon moving into Virgo, you have to ask yourself, is it really worth the effort? Is anything really worth the effort? You know that there are certain things that have to be done, but do you need to do them now? Probably not. And with moon in Virgo, you're possibly going to be a little more sensitive than usual. Things will get to you more, and if you try to take on too much, the sensitivity could just intensify, and you might just find that you really can't do much because it is all too much. So Virgo, don't take on more than you have to, and also consider your priorities. What is important, and one priority that you might have is that you might feel that there is one area that you feel that it's just not working as well as it should do. I mean, you know what the problem is, but it's just not happening. And there might be all sorts of other things that you should be attending to, and you're not attending to it, and you're not quite sure what to do, and you think, well, that's just the way it is. If you can't do something, you can't do something. But Libra, what you probably should be doing is focusing on yourself, accepting that you haven't got all the resources in the world in terms of emotional resources, inspirational resources. You haven't got all the resources in the world, and you therefore have to concentrate on just one thing that matters. And this one thing that matters is just this area where you just know that right now it's not working as well as it should be. And just give it everything. Give it everything you've got. Don't be distracted. You might have to learn something, you might have to talk to people, but what you're trying to do is get better at something. And it won't take much if you just give it everything you've got. And then over the next couple of days, maybe into next week, you'll have a chance to actually use what you've learned, or use what you've developed. You will be in a better position. And I I think actually at this stage you may actually benefit from the sun moving out of Aquarius into Pisces. And now, sun moving into Pisces, that doesn't have, when does that happen? Sun moves into Pisces on the 18th, which is, what day of the week is the 18th? The 18th is that's Tuesday of next week. So yeah, Tuesday of next week, sun goes into Pisces. And you see, when that happens, the sun is making a mutual reception by exaltation to Venus. And so if you're feeling a little bit out of sorts at the moment, don't worry. Venus is in Aries right now, and Venus being in Aries, you perhaps feel you haven't got as much control and agency as you'd like to have, and there might not be sufficient support, or you may feel you have to be spending too much time worrying about what other people are doing. And so, yeah, there could be a certain sense of powerlessness. I don't want to exaggerate it, but today you really need to think about why you might be powerless. And it goes back to this idea about working on something. If something isn't good enough or isn't working well, then you can address it, and you don't have to address it in company. You don't have to address it in a public way. You can just work on it, and that is good preparation. Because when, as I said, when the sun does go into Pisces early next week, I think that will really strengthen you. And maybe at the moment, Libra, that is just something you just should be working on. I'm sorry not to be more positive. I would have liked to have been more positive, but I'm trying to be constructive. And I do think, Libra, there are definitely things that you can be doing, and if you do them now, you'll see the benefits sometime next week. Scorpio, the full moon, which was such a feature of yesterday, is starting to lose its power, at least in its sort of immediate phase. And the reason is that the moon is moving out of Leo into Virgo. You no longer have a situation where the sun and the moon are in opposite signs. Sun in Aquarius, moon in Leo. We don't have that anymore. And Scorpio, to an extent, that's going to take some of the pressure off you. It's not going to be so important to do stuff, so important to be seen and heard. It doesn't matter so much, and possibly you can afford to be a little more relaxed and also friendly. The moon moving into Virgo, because you lose a little bit of focus, it does actually make you more accessible, and people will be more responsive to you, and I think that you will be more responsive to them, and it might be an opportunity to do something in terms of your social life, to interact with your friends. I mean, nothing dramatic. You shouldn't expect a huge amount to happen today, because it's just not that kind of day, and there aren't that many aspects going on. And it's just Moon and Virgo. Moon does make a square to Jupiter. That's a reminder that you shouldn't take things too far. Gentle socializing. If you spend too much time with other people with that Moon square Jupiter, then you might just get annoyed, and you might feel that you're being taken advantage of. So give people a bit of your time. You don't have to give people all of your time. Though maybe, Scorpio, what really matters today is your freedom, and you will want to be free. There's just something you're just going to want to rid yourself of. Something that's been bothering you. I'm not necessarily talking about a person. It may be just a situation or a scene or just something you have been engaged with that you don't like, you don't appreciate it, and it's getting you down. Not getting you down in a super serious way, because it's just been going on and on maybe. But what you can do now is take an action to free yourself. And the action may not even be an external action, it just may be a decision or a realization, and it just happens. And Scorpio, when it happens, you realize that everything's fine. What were you worrying about? You had allowed something to hold you back, and now you're free of it. But it may actually relate back to the full moon, because the full moon, for all of us, regardless of our sign, is a point of realization. When we see the way things really are, and so when we see things for what they really are, we're then able to make decisions on the basis of knowledge. And so when you look back at the full moon, when you look back at the last couple of days, it just occurs to you that something has shifted, that something you thought was important, that might have been a pain, it might have been a chore, it's not really important at all. And actually, you can let go of it. And it's all in keeping, Scorpio, with your need for freedom. Freedom really does matter today. And freedom today is something that you really can find. And so don't doubt yourself, and don't feel guilty. One can be made to feel guilty if one thinks about one's freedom. There may be a sense of obligation that may have been going back a long time. You're obliged to carry on with something, but with that full moon, you might realize finally that an obligation is actually over, and one thing leads to another, and you feel a sense of inspiration. Maybe you have the inspiration of having let go of one thing, you have a new idea, and you see actually what is possible, and your mind is starting to spark, and to spark with possibilities, and there'll be an increased number of possibilities, and you are becoming, I think, more inspired. And you're probably helped by the fact that Mercury is about to move into Pisces. That happens very soon, but Pisces is a water sign. Mercury is a sign connected, with the mind, and it's Mercury moving into Pisces can be very imaginative, and it can actually support you in terms of what you want to do. And so that is something that I will be looking at, Mercury moving into Pisces tomorrow. I mean, it's going to be important for everyone in their own way, but I think it has a particular impact on Scorpio in terms of allowing you to understand, what really is possible for you. Sagittarius, the full moon has happened, and I don't know how you related to the full moon. Hopefully, Sagittarius, the full moon was a time when you got lots of ideas, and you started to see, what was possible, what was not possible, and you were maybe able to see the truth. And the truth might have been harsh. You realize that just something couldn't happen. But you might also have had insights into your own potential, and also the potential of your environment, what the environment could give you if you just could push things a little bit further, and if you could stretch yourself in a sort of inspirational way. But the full moon is still there. Full moons do last for a week or two at least, but the immediate power of that full moon is starting to dissipate now, because the moon is changing sign. The moon is moving out of Leo into Virgo, and with the moon moving into Virgo, Sagittarius, it can be a time where you feel that now is a chance to make things happen for yourself, to actually make a decision about where you want to go. Moon in Virgo for you, Sagittarius, can be quite ambitious, and it's a kind of ambition that you might be a little bit concerned about because it might be a bit inconvenient. You don't really want to just concentrate on one thing. It just seems a bit limiting. But sometimes you've got to deal with limits, and Moon in Virgo could allow you to decide what's important, what you really want to concentrate on, and it may be a little bit intrusive. It's like you may be involved with something, and almost comfortable being involved in whatever you're involved with, but almost comfortable. It's not the end result, and there's a little bit of complacency here, and that Moon in Virgo is challenging. It points things out to you, saying, no, you can't just keep on moving in this particular state because you're not actually going anywhere. And perhaps you're listening too hard to what other people are saying. Perhaps there are social obligations which could be holding you up, could be relationships that you're involved with, of many different kinds, and that Moon square Jupiter is asking you to move on and to concentrate on something specific. And it's just something you don't want to do for some reason, but do try to be specific and try to concentrate on one thing, and don't let outside distractions get in your way. People can be distractive right now because people are uncertain. People don't really know what they want, and you're picking up on this uncertainty. And in fact, Sagittarius, you may actually become part of this uncertainty. You're taking ownership of something that doesn't belong to you. So I'm sure other people have good reason for being uncertain, and you can pick up this uncertainty on an emotional level and almost try to personalize it, but it's not your uncertainty. You actually are deep down completely certain. You might not feel like it, but you get everything. And so with the Moon moving into Virgo, it's now a point of departure. It should be a point of departure when you can actually start to concentrate on what matters to you right now. So by all means, be aware of people. I mean, you have to be aware of people to an extent. I mean, Jupiter is in Gemini. Jupiter is your ruler. It's in Gemini. Gemini is a very relationship-orientated sign in the Sagittarian horoscope. You have to be aware of people, but you can't do things their way, and you can't allow their confusion to be your confusion, because deep down, Sagittarius, you do get it. You really do. And it may actually be a situation, Sagittarius, where you have to be a role model, something for people to aspire to. So you kind of break free. You do things your way. And to begin with, there might be pressure. Other people might not be happy about it. But you are showing the way forward. And in the end, it's quite possible, Sagittarius, that people just follow your example, and that would be great. Capricorn, the Moon is moving into Virgo, so moving out of Leo into Virgo, and that means that the full moon is over, and with the Moon in Virgo, you start to see new possibilities that in the past you might not have been aware of, or you might have been aware of these possibilities, but you didn't take them seriously. You didn't feel that they were very important. But with the Moon in Virgo, It's a time when you can, realign yourself and look at everything with fresh eyes, and you see things that you hadn't seen before. And it starts by noticing that certain things have changed, perhaps since the full moon. Certain things have changed, they're not quite the same, and something that not so long ago seemed to be impossible can actually become real. And if it becomes real, you can benefit in many different ways. Okay, maybe you can benefit materially, but maybe you can benefit spiritually. I mean, it depends on where you are and what you want to achieve and what you're looking for. But there is still a challenge here, because the moon in Virgo does make a square to Jupiter, and with that moon square Jupiter, there could be a certain irritation. You don't want to change things. You don't want to change some of the structures you've created in your life, and all of that effort, all of that energy, just it may be really disconcerting. But that moon square Jupiter is asking you to change things a little bit. I mean, you don't have to completely overthrow everything that you've built. It's not about that. It's just being bothered to move beyond some of the routines that you've decided were really important, but maybe they weren't quite so important. And it's always important to be flexible. Capricorns, they can be flexible if they think it's important to be flexible, if they need to be flexible. But sometimes you just want to stay where you are. But it's important not to stay where you are, and to consider possibilities, and not to be too stuck in your own way, and which you could be. I mean, there is some risk of that, but I mean, I don't want to overstate it. If we look at today in general, I would not say that today was particularly dramatic in a good or a bad sense, but I do think that you are open to new possibilities, or new possibilities are becoming open to you if you're ready to make a little bit of effort. And at the same time, Capricorn, it does seem that your ability to interact with people is actually very good. You just know what to say. You know how to make people happy. You know what they want to hear, and you can say it, but you're not going to be unrealistic. You're not going to lie to people just to make them happy. That's not the Capricorn way. But you can say things which are listened to. People do listen to you, and you're able to show an understanding. And because you can show an understanding, you can get people's support, and in fact you can get people's loyalty. And that may be a part of today. Again, it's optional. You don't have to do it, but it does seem to be a day when, by and large, you can do pretty much what you want, because there's nothing overly dramatic happening. And when there's nothing dramatic happening, that does give you choices. But don't be afraid of the future, and don't be afraid of just expanding your horizons a little bit, because it might be worth the effort, and it might be worth a little bit of disruption. A little bit of disruption shouldn't be anything to be worried about. And reconfiguring your routine, won't be as difficult as it sounds. Aquarius. Mercury is about to leave your sign. That happens tomorrow. The Sun is going to leave your sign in 5 days. And so the Aquarian season is coming to an end. And that might sound a bit sad, but there are advantages of the Aquarian season coming to an end. I mean, there is going to be less pressure on you, but still, right now in these last 5 days, or indeed, even by tomorrow, Mercury moves out of your sign, there might be a little bit of a hurry. Perhaps there are things that you really wanted to get together and you haven't quite sorted it out, and you want to sort it out, and that matters to you, and so don't be distracted. And if there is something that really is important to you, then really make sure you go for it and do it in a very focused and deliberate kind of way, because there is enough time left. But even when things move out of Aquarius, things move into Pisces, that's not the end of the world. It just creates a change of emphasis. You've worked out who you are, and now you have to actually make sure you've got resources to see it through. But we can talk about that a bit later, next week, perhaps when the sun does move into Pisces. At the moment, the moon is moving into Virgo, and that means that this full moon, yesterday's full moon, which was right across the main axis of your chart, it's sun in Aquarius, moon in Leo, that full moon is over. At least it's really powerful phase. I mean, full moons last a couple of weeks. I mean their overall influence, but the phase when you can really feel it, when you can really feel the power of that lunation, is over, because the moon is in Virgo, and you have now, with the moon in Virgo, to start to think about what that full moon actually meant. And I'm hoping with that full moon, Aquarius, that you came to some conclusions, and there were some realizations about yourself, about the people in your life, and what was holding you back, what opportunities there might be in the future. Hopefully you had these realizations, and with the moon in Virgo, you should be trying to really piece them together and look at things beyond the surface. Go deep down. What does this really mean for you, and how is this going to change, and what kind of transformations are you going to put into action? Not necessarily right now, but over the next week, perhaps. What kind of changes do you want to bring about? And you can really now start to understand things, and you understand things perhaps in a broad sense, but you can now start to look at the minutiae. Go deep down, really get into the minutiae, and you don't need any help, and it's all beginning to make sense, and it is a private process, but that doesn't mean to say that you need to be an entirely private person today. I think that your ability to talk to people is actually very good, and you'll know what to say, and you'll know how to make people happy if need be, and do make a special effort to take an interest in what other people are doing and what other people's interests are. It's not that you have to be especially sincere, but you are recognizing people. That's what people want. People want to be recognized as individuals, and that's something you very much can do. And at the same time, you can possibly work on different levels. You can work with different people with very different interests and have sufficient flexibility to move from one person to another, give different people what they want, tell people what they want to hear, and that should help to maybe stabilize things on a social level. So if certain relationships have been a bit up in the air, they've been a little bit nebulous, now's a time when you can really start to create some social order. Pisces, the other does have to be considered. I mean, after all, the moon is moving into Virgo, and Virgo is your opposite sign, and so when the moon is in Virgo, it's a time to consider the other people, the people in your life can be relevant for relationships, especially as the moon is making a square to Jupiter. So, Jupiter is your ruler. So you've got Jupiter in Gemini is square moon in Virgo. And this moon square Jupiter may be somewhat challenging. It's like you want to do things in your own way, and part of you would like to put up the do not be disturbed sign. I mean, there have been times with Jupiter in Gemini. I think Jupiter went into Gemini in May of last year. So since May, there may have been times when Pisceans did really value their privacy, and you didn't want people to intrude. And with the moon in Virgo square Jupiter, you might feel like that today in particular. You might feel that you would like to be left to your own devices, and you'd like to pretend that other people didn't matter, that other people didn't have an influence on you, that you were in complete control of your destiny. I mean, you're always in control of your destiny to an extent, but to say you're in complete control of your destiny, well, things happen. Other people have an influence, and with the moon in Virgo making that square to Jupiter, that really does become clear. People have an influence, and you may be annoyed by what other people are doing, saying, suggesting, and somehow you just have to be tolerant and patient and not feel that you're giving anything away. You can acknowledge people and acknowledge their influence without really compromising your independence, and try to understand what people are trying to say, try to understand what they're really thinking and feeling deep down. That could be difficult. The Mercury is semi-sextile Neptune today, and that's one of the main aspects. And with Mercury semi-sextile Neptune, it's not that aspect is not about you in one sense. Mercury semi-sextile Neptune, it's more about certain people being confusing. They appear to be confusing. They find it difficult to articulate who they are and what they want, and trying to judge other people could be next to impossible. Well, it's always impossible trying to judge people. That's not something one should do. But maybe ask yourself why some people are confused. They don't know what to do. What's the reason? And with Mercury semi-square Neptune, we shouldn't forget that Neptune is in Pisces, and Pisces is your sign. And it is possible, Pisces, that there is something about you and the way you present yourself which other people don't understand. And because they don't understand you, you don't understand them. Maybe people just don't fully know how to behave in your presence, or just maybe something about your vibes that is confusing. I mean, it's not that you're confused, it's that just something about you muddies the water. And so in that sense, Pisces, I think a little bit of honesty is a good idea. And so with the moon in Virgo, in your various interactions, you should try to be as straightforward as possible, and try to focus on the material details. Don't say things which which could be misinterpreted. Keep it simple. Keep the whole way in which you present yourself simple, and then the people around you might just feel that things are less complicated, and they might then be able to be sort of more honest about what they want. And so, in a way, it all starts with you, and trying to be as down to earth as possible, and try to really accept other people's frailties, and be tolerant, when they make mistakes, and consider your own responsibility, because it's not a situation which is completely new, which has been imposed upon you. At some level, you are responsible for it, and so be straightforward, and in that way, other people can be straightforward as well. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. And I ask the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 27, which is the corners of the mouth. You can see the corners of the mouth with this hexagram. You've got top and bottom lines, top and bottom lips, and then you've got the side of the mouth that kind of looks like a mouth. And there can be a sense with the corners of the mouth that we have perhaps taken on a little bit too much, because the mouths, we can think of the bulging cheeks of a hamster. That's how Greg Winkup sees this, because it's about nourishment and it's about what we're consuming. And so we've got a lot to deal with here, and we probably don't want to take on too much. And with the moon in Virgo, the moon in Virgo is about, as I said at the beginning of this video, the moon in Virgo is about discernment, and we maybe have to decide what should be consumed and what should not be consumed. And this hexagram, corners of the mouth, can be about diet, and it's asking us to take our diet seriously. And diet, not just in terms of gaining weight, losing weight, but in terms of nutritional balance, not eating junk food. And that might be it. That might just be the only thing that we need to take away from this. But we do have the third line moving, and third line moving, there are issues around nourishment, and there is some danger that we do something which denies ourselves nourishment. We should be focusing on things which do support and nourish us, but there's a danger that we do stuff which is not nourishing at all. Now, that might be stuff that we're eating. Maybe it's, dead calories? Is that a phrase? What's a dead calorie? A dead calorie is you eat some food, but it's of no value at all. It doesn't help you. It's just calories for the sake of calories, and maybe it tastes nice. It's just indulgence. Maybe alcohol, for example, is dead calories. And so be very careful about consuming stuff you don't need to consume. And the third line can be about luxury, overindulgence, eating too much, and just not being happy with the end result. So it is important not to overindulge ourselves, and to really think about what we are eating. And it's not just about food, it's about what we are consuming. It's what we are bringing into our life, pleasure and leisure. Is it really important? We don't want to stuff ourselves, going back to this image of the hamster with bulging cheeks. There is there is a danger of stuffing ourselves. And stuffing ourselves, again, it doesn't have to be about food. It can be alcohol, intoxicants. It can be wasting time watching too much TV. I mean, I don't have a TV, but of course now you don't need to have a TV. You can just spend all day watching YouTube videos. It's easy, isn't it? But there is a sense of overindulgence, and there's a warning about it. And this overindulgence may not be our overindulgence. It may be someone else's overindulgence. We may witness someone's overindulgence. So that's something we could see. And there's a question of how do we deal with it? And then third line moves. So with the third line moving, this moves to 22, which is grace. And it's really very different. And grace is about what we look like, how we present ourselves. And maybe when we look back to the previous hexagram, we perhaps need to think about our image, or maybe it's other people's image. We want to present ourselves in the right way. And we want to present ourselves as someone who is not obsessed by small things, unimportant things like an obsession with consumption. And so we really need to make sure that everything is in the right place. And it's not the fundamentals that matter, it's how we appear. And so, appearances are everything in the end. And so everything has to be done properly, and it needs to look good. And certainly overindulgence doesn't look good. And if we can give the appearance of being someone who is quite restrained, and we're careful what we eat, and we don't give the impression that we're just into having fun for the sake of it. That's the kind of impression we want to give. But grace is not an especially powerful hexagram. It's not saying that anything fundamental is going on. I mean, it's not a fundamental hexagram. It's not about fundamentals. It's about what things look like. And if we can sort out what things look like and present ourselves as someone who is moderate and restrained, then we'll be giving our reputation, a real boost. And now I want to talk about USAID, and it's a difficult one, and maybe I'll lose some subscribers. But you have to remember that this is not a politics channel. This is an astrology channel, and so as far as possible, I wanted to sort of stick to the astrology of the situation. But it's just been getting so much coverage. Elon Musk and his Doge trying to cut back on expenditure and going through everything. And there is a view that Elon and Donald, they have an ideological agenda. And USAID has been getting a lot of attention. The fact that they've said, I don't know what it was it having a budget of $50 billion, and they're cutting back on this budget, and this budget was used for food and healthcare around the world, cutting back on it, and it's a humanitarian disaster. I mean, that is the impression we are getting. And so USAID started with an executive order on November the 3rd, 1961. I don't know what time that executive order was signed by John F. Kennedy. And I tried to get some ideas. Chat GPT suggested, didn't give me a time. It said, well, these executive orders are usually signed late afternoon, late morning, early afternoon. So, I went for noon for the signing of this executive order. So here is the chart of the executive order, which was, I think it was Executive Order 10973, which Kennedy signed. And this is the beginning of USAID. So what's it all about? I mean, I know this is an astrology channel, but we do have to look a little bit about the history of USAID. So there was a book written in 1958 called The Ugly American, and it's worth reading. It's really readable. It's great. It's by William Lederer and Eugene Burdick, and this book was a complaint in a way about how badly American foreign policy and the diplomatic service were run, and it was written by two people. I mean, one was an academic. I think Eugene Burdick was it one of the two? One of the two. One of them was an academic. They'd both been in the Navy during the Second World War, and they saw in the 50s that US diplomats didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have any connection with the local population, and that you had new diplomats would join the service. They would have no connection with the local population. That they could just buy American products from the commissary of their embassy, of the American embassy, and this was how diplomacy was faring, and as a result, the United States was losing ground against the Soviet Union, because there was always a contrast. But there was a contrast between the American ambassador, who was perhaps a political appointee, and the Russian ambassador, who was very serious. The Russian ambassador often knew the local language and was sort of perhaps interacting with the local Communist Party, and America was losing ground. And all of these stories were about how things weren't working. And of course, 1958 was in the wake of the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954, when the French were defeated in North Vietnam. They were thrown out of Vietnam, and Lederer and Burdick I think they were quite into the domino theory, that the Russians were spreading their influence in Indochina. I mean, they're kind of a really paranoid theory. I mean, all the Vietnamese wanted was independence, and after the Second World War, the Vietnamese loved the Americans, but it all changed because of America's behaviour. But anyway, that's beside the point. And The Ugly American was represented a fictional country which was kind of meant to be sort of maybe Cambodia or South Vietnam or Vietnam. And there's one story in here which I think does link with USAID, and he gives this fictional story because he has a fictional country called, which is kind of based on somewhere in Indochina, the fictional country of Sarkhan. And in this vignette, again, it's kind of fiction. It talks about the Americans sending rice to this country, Sarkhan, out of the goodness of their hearts. They send all this rice, and these American boats turn up, and the American jeeps, they take the rice off the pier, and they deliver it to the Sarkhan. And it's a big fanfare. The Prime Minister of Sarkhan is there. And then what happens is it gets delivered to the local people, and there are people with loudspeakers saying, look, all this rice has come. It's all come from Russia. And the people are confused. But meanwhile, there are these communists working behind the scenes, and they take every single bag of rice and they stamp they stamp something like, let's see what they stamp. This is... So it says here, as each bag was removed from the scale, the checker came up to it and stenciled a few words in Sarkanese on each of the white bags. And of course the Americans couldn't read the local language. And then it goes on to say, on each bag of rice, there was stenciled in Sarkanese for every citizen to see and read for himself, this rice is a gift from Russia. And so this is the context of USAID. It was this book, The Ugly American, which prompted, maybe in other things, but which prompted the creation of USAID. And so when one thinks of USAID, one shouldn't think of some
humanitarian organization which America is doing out of the goodness of its heart. It's all about soft power. It's about giving aid to different countries around the world, and you want something in return. And I think that this is really seen in this chart of USAID, November the 3rd, 1961. It happened on the day of a Sun-Neptune conjunction. So there is something fundamentally deceptive about USAID. Its intentions, Sun in Scorpio, conjunct Neptune, are not clear. And you've got Mars in Scorpio as well. So it's a very Scorpio organization. I mean, I think you can take the executive order as the beginning of this organization. And USAID does lots of different things. And if you look at the press, people are really focusing on the humanitarian aid, all these relief for poverty and education and so forth. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. It's there for spreading America's influence. It's essentially you could say it's an instrument of American imperialism. And USA doesn't just give its money to for food. It also gives money for media. It supposedly encourages a free press, an independent press. That's what it says. Of course, independent press means a press that is supportive of United States interests. That's what independent means. And it supposedly supports democracy. Of course, again, supporting democracy means supporting the US. And in Ukraine, it's I think 90% of media in Ukraine until very recently was funded by USAID, and so this is what USAID is about, and it's about pushing. It is about pushing an ideological agenda, which can change. And sort of now, the ideological agenda is, it can be. It can be something, it can relate to sort of gay rights or transgender rights. I'm not saying there's anything good or bad about them, gay rights seem to me to be pretty obvious, but, pushing a particular agenda. And so that's really what USAID is about. And you can't just focus on, USAID stops delivering food, then people will starve. It's not just about that. And I do think that we really can see that with USAID, and of course organisations like the BBC receive money from USAID, and it's just kind of interesting with the war in Ukraine how uniform the mainstream media is in supporting a particular narrative in the Ukraine, that Ukraine is 100% in the right, that Ukraine is winning as far as is possible. And that's part of how USAID works. That's part of its agenda. And so looking at the chart of USAID, we see a conjunction between Mercury and Venus, and so Mercury and Venus, it's a very nice conjunction. Venus in Libra conjunct Mercury. It's about communication. And that's a reminder about what USAID is part of. What USAID became. It was about the media, and it was very successful, and it has at manipulating the media, and in many cases playing a role in undermining governments. For example, the fall of the elected Ukrainian government in 2014. You saw the fall of the government in Bangladesh. I think that American influence had an impact on that. And so that is perhaps Mercury Venus, and how the USAID has had an impact on the press, and had a growing impact on the press around the world. And it really is soft power being used very effectively. And Mercury in Libra is square Saturn. So
Mercury in Libra is nice, but square Saturn, that square Saturn in Capricorn, in its own sign, that really does remind us that there is an agenda. It's not just about kindness and warmth, and the agenda is there, and it's important to push a particular message. And then look at the nodes. So the North Node was at 24 degrees Leo, and Mars was square the North Node. So that Mars square the North Nodes, there is something, I would have said, quite aggressive about that. Mars in Scorpio might not be overt. Mars in Scorpio, not like Mars in Aries, but it's working behind the scenes to push American imperial and ideological interests. And you know, when we look at the American chart, we shouldn't forget that here is the USA's chart. USA has a strong Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter is all about, America has become, very, very into its ideology. Regime change has become so important to governments since the Second World War, and USAID after 1961 became part of a way in which America could influence governments and, in certain cases, change regimes, whether it's through setting up of NGOs or control of the press. So this is what America has become. So in terms of how you see America and the and USAID, so there's Mercury's Gemini. Sorry. There's America's Mercury in Cancer. So Mercury was square America's, at the time of the executive order, Mercury is square America's Mercury, Saturn is opposition America's Mercury. So that Mercury-Saturn square at the time of the foundation of the USAID was opposition. Was opposition the United States' Mercury in Cancer, and so it is very much about how the United States communicates a particular message. And it happened around the time of a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that the USAID came into being. And that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, Saturn was at 24 Capricorn, Jupiter at 29 Capricorn, was close to America's Pluto. So kind of America's Pluto was on the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint of of USAID, and so that highlights the United States' Pluto. Part of Pluto is about wanting to change things, and that could be about changing governments, and that's what you want to do. That's what you're trying to do. You are trying to be in control. And the last administrator I think there was another one, but the administrator up until Trump's inauguration was a woman called Samantha Power. And Samantha Power was born in London. I don't have a time of birth for Samantha Power. She was, under Obama, she was the United States ambassador at the UN. And so she very much was part of the Democrat establishment, and you can see from her chart that she is a Virgo, but it's not really her chart that I'm too bothered with. She's got Mercury-Mars conjunction in Virgo, so clearly she has strong beliefs, and she's really wants to articulate those beliefs. And looking at the relationship between Samantha Power and USAID and that executive order, so we've got USAID in the middle and we've got Samantha Power on the outer wheel. And what I found quite amazing was Black Moon Lilith. So USAID's true black moon Lilith was at 2557 Leo, and Samantha Power's true black moon Lilith was at 2515 Leo. So there is a darkness to true black moon Lilith. It's not on the surface. It's about machinations and what you are trying to undermine and what you are trying to create, and it's sort of dark forces working behind the scenes. And that was always the potential for USAID, because it's got the USAID has a North Node conjunct true black moon Lilith. So North Node conjunct true black moon Lilith would be the way forward. What this organization is about is using dark forces. There was that. I would use dark forces. There's a book by Dennis Wheatley about talking about the Third Reich and the Satanism, and he called that book was called "They Used Dark Forces." I mean, I suppose I shouldn't really use that term for America. I don't want to make that comparison really, but there is an idea of dark forces, and it's hard coded into the chart of USAID, and Samantha Power's true black moon Lilith picks up on that. And so you could say that over the last 4 years, during the Biden administration, USAID, under Samantha Power's leadership, completely went into overdrive. The darkness of this organization really started to manifest. In particular, I'm thinking about control of the press and using the press to push a particular narrative. And in the case of Ukraine, I think in many cases it's a false narrative. But when you've got so many media outlets at a time when mainstream media is under a lot of pressure financially, when you have all these alternative forms of media, and mainstream media is under pressure, and here is USAID prepared to be generous with its donations, and I do think that we really can see that in this chart. Samantha Power's Venus is Venus at 12:12. I mean, I don't know exactly what her time of birth, but Samantha Power's Venus in Scorpio, that's sort of quite sort of devious Scorpio, is I mean, not devious, but going under the surface, not necessarily keeping one's intentions, not entirely being open about one's intentions. That Venus conjunct the Sun and conjunct USAID's Sun. Oh, and look at Samantha Power's Saturn. Her Saturn was opposition USAID's Mars. So maybe that was a problem, and it's not just Saturn conjunct. It wasn't just opposition USAID's Mars, but her Saturn was square the nodal axis, and so her Saturn really brought USAID together, squares its nodes, conjuncts its Mars, really making USAID reveal its full potential, and you could say its full negative potential. And so that's Samantha Power. And then what went wrong? I mean, what happened when Trump got elected? Or indeed, how does Trump relate to USAID? So here's Donald Trump's horoscope, and here is we've got USAID's chart in the middle. And so what does Trump do? Trump has a Venus-Saturn conjunction at 23 Cancer, and so he's at 23, and he's got his Saturn at 23 Cancer, Venus at 25 Cancer. So Trump's Saturn was opposition the Saturn of USAID. So USAID came into being, of course, when Trump was. How old was Trump when USAID came into being? He would have been 15. So that at his half Saturn return, USAID came into being, and so there's a clash between Trump's Saturn and USAID's Saturn, and it also links with USAID's Mercury-Venus conjunction. And so Trump's Saturn was square USAID's Venus-Mercury. So that does indicate that Trump had the capacity to cause a lot of damage to USAID. And of course, what really did for USAID was Trump getting elected. And as soon as Trump became president, the chart of the days of USAID were numbered. And so here's what was happening to USAID at the time that Trump became president. And we can think about Uranus. So Uranus was at 2318 Taurus. So Uranus was squaring the nodes. So the north node, north and south node was north node at 24 Leo. So Uranus was square that. So that wasn't great. And you could say true black moon Lilith comes up again because it's a square Mercury. And so it was perhaps a time when things were starting to go a bit wrong. And in terms of the solar arc directions, so if you look at the solar arc, if you look at the solar arc directions for USAID at the time of the inauguration, well, in fact, I've taken these for today, but the solar arc directions don't move very much. So USAID's solar arc USAID's solar arc directed sun was at 15 Aquarius. So the sun was sesquiquadrate its Uranus. So the sun sesquiquadrate Uranus represented this very dramatic thing that happened to USAID, this dramatic collapse, how it got incorporated into the State Department. And so I think that some of these transits are working. And of course, we just had a full moon. The full moon was the full moon. If you look at USAID's chart and the full moon was at when was the full moon? The full moon was at 24/6 Leo, and USAID's North Node was at 24/9 Leo. So this full moon has really, really hit USAID, and it's square USAID's Mars, and the full moon really did for USAID. And of course, the USAID was under attack before the full moon happened. But this is the final end of it, I think. And one country that has been impacted by USAID is Ukraine. So here is the horoscope for Ukraine, and Ukraine is a Virgo country. This is a time for when Ukraine declared independence. And so what's kind of interesting is USAID, when USAID was founded, its Uranus was at zero Virgo at the time of USAID's founding on November the 3rd, 1961. And Uranus's sun is at 0 degrees Virgo. And so this might give us an idea about the role USAID has perhaps helped to play in Ukraine. The sun represents the integrity of the country, and USAID has been arguably part of Ukraine's problem. USAID did what it could to spread American influence in Ukraine. I'm not saying that USAID was responsible for the coup in 2014, but America overall overthrew Ukraine, overthrew the elected government in 2014. And so that Uranus conjunct the sun, it just represents what was going on at the time of 1961. This was what USAID was formed for. the food distributions and giving food to people who are starving, that is a means to the end, a means to an end for the USAID. It was an instrument of US policy, and I think this has been demonstrated by looking at the charts. And in Ukraine, as we know, 90% of Ukrainian media up until Trump's inauguration was funded by USAID, and of course the media is pushing a particular message, and a lot of Ukrainians are dying, and they're supporting Ukraine's really destructive war against Russia. And of course everyone in the West, the mainstream media, is uniform in its support of this war and support of and belief in the reasons of the war. It's all completely Russia's fault. There's no way in which you can see two sides to the issue, and it's very unusual for a war where you've got one side being 100% right. That just doesn't happen. But anyway, the mainstream media has been pushing a narrative, and that narrative has been pushed by USAID, and the charts really do show it. And so that's an astrological view on USAID. Of course, I have my own views, but I do think that the charts speak for themselves. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say on the subject. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to unsubscribe, and that's fine. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.